Um, Hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here on a snowy day here in Minneapolis. It snowed quite heavily yesterday for the folks who are out of state or something. So for the folks in person, thank you so much for being here. This was a very short notice event that we wanted to start as the EMBS kickoff in the Twin Cities back again. We had, I mean, Elle knows the history of EMBS. We had a pretty big community here in the Twin Cities, but then COVID kind of shut it down. And then last year, Sai, who kind of put in the request to start up the chapter again, was the chair, and then he stepped down. So when I became the chair, I was like, okay, let's just bring the community together. I met amazing people at these conferences. I'm like, I would love for them to be here and speak with us, share their interests, share their thoughts, and have a great discussion as we start the EMBS chapter. I am the chair right now. I think we have 3 officer positions open. If you all would love to be take a role, not too much work. It's just like 2 events a year is kind of what we are going for here. Could be happy hours, talks, virtual chats, anything that we can do to bring the community together, industry, academia, and just learn from each other. So I would like to start with our first talk of the day from Mark Wehde. Is that how you pronounce your last name? Okay. It's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, Mark. He is the chair of the Division of Engineering at Mayo Clinic. Mark leads a small yet highly influential team dedicated to creating hope for patients through development of novel medical devices. Everything his team does is rooted in improving the patient experience and equipping healthcare professionals with innovative tools to deliver exceptional care. Mark brings with him an extraordinary depth of experience and knowledge. He spent 16 years as a medical device development engineer before transitioning into leadership, giving him a rare blend of hands-on technical expertise and strategic vision. His loyalty to Mayo Clinic, passion for engineering, and leadership in medical devices makes him a powerful force in advancing patient-centered innovation. I feel grateful that Mark is one of our first keynote speakers for this kickoff, and hope that we get similar talks coming forward. So thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for those of you who braved the weather to show up in person today. We got a handful of people in the room for those of you that are online, and unfortunately, I have heard that you're not going to get the pizza delivered at home, so you're gonna miss out on that. But for those of us brave enough, we'll get to have that. Thanks everybody for being here. We're going to talk a bit about how technology is transforming healthcare. This is one of the things I'm very passionate about. I want to talk about what that means for us, not just in healthcare, but really any industry where technology is becoming more and more a core part of our business. And I do come from the world of medical devices and hospital systems, but the principles we're going to talk about, like innovation, leadership, and disruption, apply broadly to really any field. And I'm going to share a lot of stories from Mayo Clinic. That's where most of my experience is. So we'll talk a bit about the front line of healthcare. But the real goal is to explore how we as leaders and technologists can be more thoughtful and intentional about how we shape the future. And I am excited to be here as part of this inaugural EMBS meeting, or the restart of it, and also the Sensors Society that this is a part of as well. I've been involved with the IEEE for quite a few years, not with the EMBS, but was on the Board of Governors for the Technology and Engineering Management Society for about 4 years, and continue to be active with that group. I found that most of the societies in the engineering in the IEEE are now a little bit too technical for me, because I'm about 26 years since doing my last circuit design or writing code. So it's been a while. So I'll have a little bit different perspective on it. So here's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own path from engineer to chair, to show how our role as technologists is changing. And then we're going to look at the innovation story at Mayo Clinic, some of the major forces that are transforming healthcare and how these shifts mirror what's happening all across other industries. And I'll talk a little bit about what leadership really requires now as well, because it's not just about having the tools, it's about having the mindset to use the tools well. And then I will share a few things that we're learning at Mayo and what they might mean for you all, for your teams, wherever you sit in the technology landscape. A year ago, the CEO of Mayo Clinic said something that really struck with me. He said, "We are no longer a healthcare organization that uses technology. We're a technology organization that provides healthcare." And I think that captures really what this slide is about. That's the foundational idea, is that no matter what field you're in, technology is no longer a support function. It's now really the business. And the stakes are high. If you're not leading the technology, the technology is going to be leading you. And that's true in healthcare, and again, true in other industries as well. And I'll come back to that idea in a moment, but I wanted to start a little bit with my own journey from engineer to division chair. As was mentioned in the introduction, I started out as an engineer. I spent 16 years doing embedded systems, electronics, medical devices, and I really, really liked building things. And honestly, I thought that was what I was going to spend my career doing. But little by little, I found myself pulled into leadership roles, not because I had some plan, but because the problems that needed solving were bigger than what one person could solve. And I could only do that with other people. And I still see myself as an engineer, but these things I think more about designing teams, designing systems and strategy rather than designing circuit boards or writing code. And I've learned that the same mindset that serves us in these technical roles, things like curiosity and clarity and systems thinking, also are just as powerful in leadership roles as well. I want to talk a little bit about the future, but to do that, I want to frame it in the past. Innovation has been part of the Mayo Clinic identity for well over a century, and not just medical innovation, but technology innovation. So I want to show you a little bit about what that looked like. This is the origin story of the Mayo Clinic, but maybe not the story that you've heard. The Sisters of St. Francis were actually the driving force behind Mayo Clinic. There was a tornado that devastated Rochester in 1883. And after that occurred, the sisters proposed building a hospital, and they recruited the Mayo family, the father and the two brothers. They raised the funds to build the building, and when the hospital opened in 1889, they staffed both the nursing function and all of the administrative roles in that hospital. And the Mayo brothers at that time were brand new physicians and were committed to learning and service, and their father had already been the physician in Rochester for about 25 years. And after that, for nearly a century, the physicians ran the clinic and the sisters ran the hospital. And that partnership lasted until the two organizations merged in about 1984. And the involvement of the sisters in Mayo Clinic continues even to that day. And that collaboration between medicine, mission, and operational excellence are the foundations for everything else that's happened at Mayo Clinic over the years. So Mayo is the very first, the largest, and arguably the best integrated not-for-profit group practice of medicine in the world. And many people will say that was the Mayo brothers' greatest invention. They invented a lot of surgical tools and new procedures and things like that. But this group practice model was unique. That idea that medicine works better when teams work together was really brand new at the time. And I think it was a function of the fact that they were actually brothers and used to working together. And from that model came three principles that still guide us today: the team-based care, a multi-specialty practice across disciplines, and an approach of continuous learning. And these sound kind of obvious now, but when the Mayo started out, most physicians were practicing solo, and the idea of sharing information, collaborating across specialties, and putting the patient at the center, this wasn't a common thing. In fact, The Mayo model of care, that group practice by 1929 had spread to 362 other organizations across the United States, from physicians coming to Mayo, learning about it, and going out and sharing what they had learned. And that changed everything. And in a lot of ways, it's one of the reasons that Mayo Clinic is still different today. So how did this come to be? How did this little town in the cornfields of southern Minnesota come to be a worldwide destination medical center? That's a huge question, and the answer has everything to do with how Mayo chose to build its values and its models and its approach to innovation. Part of the answer lies in timing, maybe a little bit of good luck, because the Mayo Clinic was born right as the world of medicine was being transformed by two substantial breakthroughs in medicine. The first was anesthesia. Anesthesia gave us time, and time really changed how surgery was practiced. Before that, surgery was about speed. Even into the 1800s, the best surgeons were measured by how fast they could perform a surgery. One of the most famous surgeons of the day could remove a limb in 30 seconds from the first cut, sawing through the bone, and sewing the amputation closed. One time he was so fast, he not only amputated the limb, he amputated his assistant's finger. And that may sound funny, but it was really quite tragic, because both the patient and the assistant died of the infection. And that leads us to that next big innovation, which was the development of aseptic surgery. So as nice as it was that patients were unconscious during surgery, many of them still died from infection. So even with anesthesia, surgery was still a last resort. In the mid-1800s, if you suffered something like an open fracture from an accident, the survival rate was less than 50 to 60%, mostly due to infection. And then came Sir Joseph Lister. In 1865, he treated a 7-year-old boy with a compound fracture using a carbolic acid solution to clean the wound. And 6 weeks later, the boy walked out of the hospital, and that is widely considered to be the start of aseptic surgery. So that was the environment when the Mayo brothers started their practice. Aseptic surgery was first practiced in the United States in 1883, so just 6 years before the Mayo Clinic opened. So when Mayo brothers opened their clinic in 1889, gowns and gloves were becoming a more common sight in the operating room, so was the cleaning of hands and tools and surfaces. Dressings were now changed once a day instead of once a stay. And hand washing started happening before surgery, not just after. And it was a small revolution in mindset, but it set the stage for something a lot bigger. And as surgery and medicine advanced, so did the need for tools and systems and infrastructure. And that's where the engineering team came in. So engineering has been part of the Mayo story for over a century, since 1915, shaping everything from bone screws to brain implants. So with anesthesia and aseptic surgery taking hold, surgical tools began to evolve and evolve rapidly, and Mayo needed people that could keep up. And that's why the engineering team was born. The first instrument shop, as I said, was established in 1915, so about 110 years ago at this point. And this photo comes from an early article describing how bone screws were made in our machine shop using beef bone and a lathe. So these particular types of screws were used to repair femur fractures, and similar devices were also made for spine stabilization. In 1948, the instrument shop officially became the Division of Engineering, and one of the first big projects was supporting the development of the Mayo Gibbon heart-lung machine. This was the first commercial heart-lung bypass machine, and it was first used at Mayo Clinic in 1955. And according to the Smithsonian, it is one of the most significant contributions in the history of cardiac surgery. Around the same time, there was a team at Mayo led by Dr. Earl Wood, who developed the G-suit for pilots in World War II. So another example of Mayo physicians solving real-world problems. And long before commercial patient monitors were available, engineering teams at Mayo were already building our own. So as the new technologies emerged, the transistors in the 40s, the integrated circuit of the 50s, the mini computers of the 60s, and the first commercial microcontrollers in the 70s, we used each one of these to help push our instrumentation forward. And with every advance in hardware, our monitors, our patient monitors became more capable, more compact, and more integrated into the practice of care. And it wasn't just devices. We started computerizing patient records in the 1960s using old PDP-11 type computers. That was decades before electronic medical records became standard. So these were foundational shifts, and at Mayo Clinic, we've been building these tools ourselves. Today, if you look at the engineering team, our mission is simple. We build unique medical devices to advance care for our patients. That's why we're there. And we're unusual. I don't know of another academic healthcare organization that has an applied engineering team like ours. We're embedded right in the practice, and we work side by side with the physicians every day. It wouldn't be unusual to find a biomedical engineering research department in an academic healthcare organization, but that's not us. We're not working on grants and papers and publications. We're making devices that we can use in our practice or devices that are used to support our research. The kind of work we do crosses pretty much every clinical boundary. We've done early telemedicine systems. We're working a lot to do advanced modeling of human physiology. Breakthrough surgical tools like this device, which allows mitral valve repair without the need for bypass. We've developed 3D printed components in both metal and polymer, a prototype bioartificial liver that sustained life in animal trials for 72 hours, wide range of surgical devices, and all of this in service to the patient. And when we think about the role of engineering and innovation, I think the sweet spot of innovation lies in this gap right here. And that's the gap between the ideas that our brilliant and extremely talented physicians have and the commercial marketplace. And our job in engineering is to help build a bridge across that gap. And I've spent my career working alongside physicians, and they've taught me something really important. They talk about the patients constantly, about the trust that's placed in them and the responsibility that they carry. And that reminds us that all of us in healthcare, engineers included, play a role in caring for our patients. A while back, I was talking to a surgeon here at Mayo who'd been working with our engineers and a Georgia Tech student design team to prototype a new way to reach blood clots, going through the carotid instead of through the femoral artery. And what struck with me was what he said after that. He said, "I'm not an engineer." He said, "I just want to do surgery." He said, "I don't have time to learn all this stuff. I just want to go home and play with my kids." But he said, "My patients need it, and I got to figure it out. I don't want to do it. I just want it to exist." And I think that's what innovation looks like, and that's really the heart of everything that we do. And everything that I've talked about so far, engineering and innovation and the partnership, all of this exists in a much larger context, because if we look around at the external environment now, healthcare is under a lot of pressure. Healthcare is changing, and it's not just changing incrementally, it's changing pretty dramatically. We're facing a lot of pressures. Some are structural, some are demographic, some are technological. So to understand where healthcare is going, we have to understand what's driving some of that change. And we're certainly seeing that at Mayo. We're still focused on the day-to-day needs of our patients, but we're also looking ahead at what's coming next and how healthcare is changing. And it's becoming pretty clear. The future of care is really shifting from inside hospitals to where people live. We're talking about home hospital models. We're talking about remote monitoring and wearable tech, because that's what it takes to deliver care that's affordable, scalable, and really centered on the human needs of the patient. And really, beyond our borders in the United States, there's billions of people that lack access to basic health care. And if we're going to change that, if we want to do anything about that, it won't come from building more hospitals. It comes from reimagining the way that we provide care. And that's why technology and science matter more than ever right now. There's a great book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and in it, Clayton Christensen warns us not to watch just ahead, but to look sideways at things that are coming from the side, because disruption often comes from unexpected places. And I think healthcare right now is ready for disruption. We had a futurist come give a talk at Mayo a few years ago. His name was Christian Krom, and He called what's coming a technological tsunami, not just more tech, but a complete reshaping of how we do our work. And one of the biggest forces in healthcare is longitudinal patient data, which is capturing a person's health, behavior, and even financial context over long periods of time. And then you add to that AI and advanced analytics, and we're not just collecting data. This allows us to pull insights, actionable insights from that data that can drive some real decisions in real time for us. And care is shifting beyond the clinic. We're redesigning systems so that care doesn't begin and end in the hospital. It follows people home and into their daily routines. And that also means real-time personalized treatment. So instead of waiting for a checkup to adjust a care plan, we can use real-time data to make modifications on the fly before problems arise. And to make all this work, we need to have system-wide integration of all of it. That means dissolving some of the old silos between departments, between technology platforms, between the clinic and the community. And that's the shape of the tsunami that's coming, and it's coming whether we're ready for it or not, and we want to be ready for it. Some of what's driving all this change in healthcare, if we look back at the end of the 1800s, there were a couple breakthroughs I mentioned that changed everything. That was aseptic surgery and anesthesia. By the middle of the 20th century, it was antibiotics, and with them, huge gains in health and longevity. Now in the 21st century, those forces are starting to look a little bit different. It's about demographics, our aging population. It's about technology, the accelerated pace of discovery, AI, connected devices, and just a whole flood of data. It's care at home or even care anywhere. These are the new levers of transformation, and they're moving pretty darn fast. And one of the biggest forces that is reshaping healthcare is also one of the most predictable and the most obvious. We're simply getting older as a society. By 2050, the world will have 10 billion people, and 2 billion of them will be over the age of 60. Nearly 500 million people will be over 80. And that's not just a bump in the curve, that is a global demographic shift, and it's going to change everything about how we think about care and capacity and our use of technology. And this shift is happening everywhere, but if we look at what's going on in Japan, we can see what the future is going to look like for us. So this chart on the left shows Japan's population structure from 1965 to 2065. So in 1965, Japan was a relatively young country, but by 2065, the population pyramid is going to be totally turned over, completely inverted. There's going to be more people over 65 than there will be under 20. And that's not just Japan's story. By 2050, 22% of the US population will be over 65, and in Japan, that number will be 36%. And this just doesn't change families and economies. It's going to transform healthcare. It's going to be more chronic conditions, longer lifespan, and fewer caregivers as well. And this is one of the biggest forces that's shaping what we need to build next. And if that wasn't enough, there's another pressure point. We're running out of people. In the US, we're projected to have a shortfall of 85,000 physicians by 2032. And that's not just doctors. There's shortages across nursing and surgery and radiology and all of the specialties. There have been times at Mayo over the last 3 to 4 years where we've had over 7,000 open positions and actually had to shut down operating rooms because we couldn't staff them. And the thing is, this is not just a hiring issue. It's training, and it's demographics, and it's retirements, and it's burnouts. And immigration has been the only thing that's been keeping us from becoming Japan, and we're struggling with that now. If we lose that pipeline, the only real option left to us is going to be automation. So this is really a strategic inflection point for us. If we don't rethink how we deliver care, we may not be able to deliver it at all, or at least not to all. So here we are at this strategic inflection point. Demand is rising, supply is shrinking, the math doesn't work, especially with cost going up as well. So we really have no choice but to think differently about how we provide healthcare. Fortunately, we've got tools now that we can use that didn't exist a decade ago. So I think these technologies are our way forward, and these aren't isolated trends. All of these technologies are converging, simultaneously reshaping how we diagnose, treat, deliver, and even define care. So let's start with AI and edge computing. These are enabling us to get real-time insights from massive data streams delivered at the bedside, in the home, or inside a wearable. And XR is redefining how we train and operate and collaborate. It allows us to take knowledge and turn it into an actual physical embodied experience. And robotics is expanding what we can physically do, from surgical precision to hospital logistics. On the biology side, synthetic biology and genomics are moving us towards more programmable medicine, where the therapies are tailored and targeted, and in some cases even manufactured inside the body. And then there's things like additive manufacturing, which we're working on to help produce custom implants on demand. And then we have telemedicine, which is decentralizing the expertise. And wearables are creating a continuous recording of our physiology. And all of this depends on robust, interoperable data platforms. And if all of this seems overwhelming, that's kind of the point. And the other piece is we don't have to master all of these technologies, but we do have to understand the terrain so that we can connect the dots and guide our organizations through the change that we have to go through. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how Mayo has been going through this. So back in 2018, we went through a strategic foresight process. And we weren't just looking at where medicine was, we're trying to see where medicine was going. And we asked a hard question: what will define success in healthcare over the next 20 years? And that led us to a relatively simple framework, the Cure, Connect, and Transform framework. So Cure is what we've always done. It's our clinical excellence, it's discovery, it's saving lives. Connect reflects the growing importance of digital infrastructure and sensors and data. So how we connect people, systems, and ideas. And transform is the hardest at all. It means rethinking how we work, how we serve, and what it means to be a healthcare organization in a technology-driven world. And that's where strategy meets excellence driven by leadership. And over the next few slides, I'm going to show you what that looks like in practice. So we start where we've always excelled, providing complex and serious care. This is our foundation, and it's still essential, but even now we're evolving what that looks like. We're finding new advancements like robotic surgery or advanced imaging techniques or leveraging decision support systems powered by AI. And none of this is innovation for innovation's sakes. These tools make care measurably better for our patients. And that's what this is all about. It's about bringing novel capabilities into the hands of our really great clinicians so they can do what they've always done, only do it better. And if Cure is about improving what we already do best, Connect is about extending that excellence beyond our walls. So we're working to meet patients where they are, whether that's through virtual care, through digital triage, or self-service tools that give people more control over their health. We're transforming the way care is delivered using AI and automation and advanced analytics to make that care more proactive, personalized, and more accessible to our patients. And of course, not all care happens at the bedside. There's an entire layer of administrative work that still slows us down. So we're simplifying and digitizing our administrative systems too. And that's not just an IT modernization. That's what we think of as care transformation through connection. So if Cure is what we've always done, and Connect is how we reach further outside our boundaries, Transform is how we redefine what's possible. And this is where some of the concepts like the Mayo Clinic platform become essential. It's not just about AI and machine learning. It's about creating a digital foundation that lets us unify our data, that we can pull insights from, and we can scale our expertise far beyond our campuses. So we're developing capabilities for hospital at home, virtual care, these tools that are developing to give us advanced clinical analytics so that we can deliver Mayo-level care in community hospitals, in people's homes, and even on their phones in some cases, while still keeping that human touch that defines us. It also means simplifying care, reducing the administrative burden so our teams can focus on the meaningful work and our patients get a more seamless experience. This is the essence of transformation. It's not just adopting changes, but it's really leading the transformation from within. We don't want somebody else to define what the future looks like in healthcare. We want to define it ourselves. And at Mayo Clinic, we have entered into, well, they called it the year of innovation. I call it the years of innovation. It's not science fiction anymore. It's here and now, and we're seeing this play out day by day. These technologies are being deployed as robotic pharmacists, as surgical assistants, even remote surgery platforms. And these things aren't replacing people, they're amplifying them. It's about removing what's repetitive so that clinicians can focus on the human and the complex side of what they do. And we're just at the beginning. Automation is accelerating, it's not slowing down. And we have to be prepared to help lead our teams and organizations through this shift, not just operationally, but ethically, culturally, and strategically as well. So we're seeing automations move into clinical workflows with robots taking on some of the highly repetitive tasks, the high-risk tasks, things like prescription dispensing. So we have pharmacy robots that reduce errors, are more consistent, and free up pharmacists and technicians to focus on what matters most, which is the patient care. It's frankly astonishing how much time and expertise is still spent counting pills in local pharmacies. And it's not just about mechanical automation, that's just a piece of it. These systems are increasingly integrated into clinical decision-making tools so they can help catch drug interactions or dosage errors before they reach the patient. And this is a common theme here. What's powerful is the convergence of different technologies. So we've got robotics and AI and the cloud connectivity, we've got data analytics, we've got clinical informatics. None of these are operating in isolation. They are all working together and they are working as multipliers. And I think that's a theme through the Industrial Revolution 4.0, or what we think about as Health Tech 4.0. The boundaries between these technologies are blurring. It's not just one technology, it's an ecosystem of interdependent technologies and innovations that is reshaping the kinds of things that we do. And as our populations are aging, a strategic investment in robotic assistance to support elder care is one of the obvious uses of innovation. These technologies can help us maintain our independence longer. They can give us more mobility. They can provide companionship. They can even assist us with basic daily tasks. And these don't replace human caregivers, but they extend what we can do, especially in the face of growing caregiver shortages. And this is happening in Japan right now, but it's not just a story about Japan. Many of us have already in our lives faced really hard decisions about moving loved ones into care facilities, often not because of acute medical needs, but because they can no longer live safely in their homes. So I think robotic assistants are an example of how technology can serve some of these human goals, not just about efficiency, but about dignity and autonomy and the ability to age on our own terms. And robotic surgery is no longer science fiction. It's already part of clinical care, although most of it right now happens in the same room that the patient is in. But this technology opens up a lot of new possibilities. One of them is for training. So just like flight simulators for pilots, robotic surgery platforms let us train future surgeons without them having to touch a patient to do it. So now imagine taking that capability beyond the operating room to the next room, the next building, and eventually the next city or the next country. And that future is already here. In early 2024, surgeons in India completed a fully remote complex surgery. It was the first one of that kind, proving this kind of care is not just theoretical. So you think about this, there's a lot of interesting implications for emergency responders, for example, being able to do remote interventions for trauma in the field or surgical support for astronauts in space. A lot of opportunities here. Other technologies I'm not as familiar with, but they are also showing us how technologies don't advance on their own. Things like gene editing have been around for decades. What CRISPR brings is speed and precision and accessibility to this. So What once took months in a high-end lab can now be done in days almost anywhere. And that opens up doors to some real-world impact, things like nutrient-rich crops, treatments for rare genetic diseases, new antibiotics and antivirals, and the ability to modify even entire species. Which also brings us to a really familiar intersection, the one between technological possibility and ethical responsibility. So as leaders in this field, we have to navigate both sides of that equation, not just asking, can we do that, but should we, and who decides? And speaking of ethics and tough conversations, we're going to enter the matrix. And this is one of my favorite things going on at Mayo right now. So picture a neonatal intensive care unit 10 years from now. The room is quiet. It's dimly lit. There's rows of fluid-filled artificial wombs, each one holding a tiny little premature infant, not incubated, but floating in artificial amniotic fluid. And this sounds like science fiction. This was science fiction. The biggest challenge for premature babies is usually their lungs. Lungs develop very late in pregnancy, and when babies are born too early, we rely on ventilators to push air into lungs that aren't yet ready to breathe. And this is life-saving, but it has a lot of risks as well. So what if we could bypass the lungs altogether? These artificial womb systems aim to do exactly that by oxygenating the baby's blood through an umbilical catheter, replicating the work of the placenta while suspending the baby in fluid. And this isn't theoretical. Babies born before 25 weeks are very fragile. Many don't survive, and those that do often have lifelong complications. But with modern ECMO technology, we might be able to change that. And here's the thing, we've already done it with lambs. Mayo and a handful of other research centers around the world have been working on this for a number of years. And it's no longer a question of if, but how soon and how responsibly can we bring this to human care? We're also entering into a world where we may no longer have to wait for parts. We can print them on demand exactly when and where they're needed. And the shift from stocking to fabricating has huge implications. And this isn't just about convenience, it's about agility and resilience as well. So imagine replacing a rare part for a legacy medical device in a rural hospital, or printing a custom surgical tool tuned to a specific procedure. And 3D printing isn't just evolving in scale, it's also evolving in precision. So most of us think of 3D printing in terms of printing large things that we can hold in our hands, but we can also now print at the micro scale. So we have an SLA-based micro scale printer that allows us to fabricate parts with features measured in microns, and now even with our new printer in submicrons, which opens up a lot of possibility for medical devices, for sensors, and for integrated systems. So on the left, you can see some of our early test prints. These were fins that are 10 microns wide, so that would be thinner than most cells. And on the right hand here, you can see them next to a human hair, which gives you a better sense about how small these are. And think about that, those are 10 microns, we can now go submicron, so more than an order of magnitude smaller than that. Working on this scale opens up a lot of new possibilities, especially in wearables, implantable, and micro-scale kind of fluidics. So this is part of our efforts around precision health. And we're extending point-of-care printing into the metallic space as well with the addition of our titanium printer. And what we're working towards is printing patient-matched implants, first for animal trials and eventually for human clinical use. And this would have been out of reach a few years ago, but the breakthroughs in the 3D metal printing now make this not only feasible, but practical within our organization. And what you see here is our EOS titanium printer, and that's right there. And then back beyond this is our polymer lab, where we have a number of high-end polymer printers as well. There's a few other technologies I wanted to chat about as well. Micro robotics is another fun one. A couple of you may remember the 1966 film Fantastic Voyage, where a medical team is miniaturized and injected into a patient's bloodstream to perform life-saving surgery. That concept might have been pure science fiction then, but now researchers at Mayo are developing our own version of that. Only we're not shrinking people, we're engineering micro scale robots to do this. And these micro robots are magnetically guided with external magnetic fields, and they're designed for targeted drug delivery. So instead of treating the whole body systemically with a therapy, we're aiming to deliver therapies exactly where they're needed. And as I close up here, I want to step back and share 3 lessons from healthcare that I think apply across every industry, really. First, innovation is a team sport. I don't think our great breakthroughs come from lone geniuses anymore. They come from small, focused teams of clinicians and engineers and operations leaders that solve hard problems together. That cross-disciplinary fluency is core to innovation. Another one, automation is not optional. We can't hire our way out of workforce shortages. We can redesign the work. So at Mayo, robots are delivering linens. They're moving lab samples, not because it's cool, but because it frees up nurses and other staff to do the work that only humans can do. And then leadership is the multiplier. Technology is not ever going to be the limiting factor. Culture is going to be, trust is going to be, and ethics is going to be. So if you're a leader, it's not enough to manage the roadmap. You have to shape the culture, define the guardrails that we operate within, and ensure your organization learns as fast as it builds. And these 3 lessons have changed how I lead, and I believe they're essential for anybody that is trying to lead in this era of transformation. So this is where I want to leave you. No matter what your title is, we are all technology leaders. We're not waiting for the future. The future is here. The only question is whether we are leading by intention or if we're reacting to what's happening to us. So I think we have an opportunity and a responsibility to shape the future of care, of work, and the way humans actually flourish together. And I hope all of us take on the responsibility to try to lead as wisely as we can. So thank you. I don't know if we have any questions. Yeah, let me put that there.
Do we have any questions online? Folks could unmute and ask their questions.
I'm also looking at the chat here. I don't see anything at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Just curious, the chart where you showed. Oh. The chart where you showed Japan in 1965, it actually looked like the ages were similar, men and women. But then if you look in 2025, men are dying younger. They're not an equal balance anymore.
I didn't even notice that in the chart, but I know I just reading an article, and of course in China it's exactly the opposite because of the one-child policy and the dramatic number more males that they have in China than young women.
I have a question.
Even in US, it's also the same because, for instance, if you go to the nursing homes, the majority are women. So the life expectancy of women is longer. And yeah, but now it's so the risk of cardiovascular diseases that causes death is actually higher in men, and that's the main reason for dying in earlier ages. And for instance, women are going to have dementia, so they live longer, but the quality of life is lower. So,
You have a question? May I ask?
Another about that graph. The other thing about the Japan graph is you'll notice on the men's side, you'll see a discontinuity in the age of men who were in World War II, or the age the hurricane chart kind of when you get to people who would have been about 20 in 1945, it drops dramatically. So that would have, I think, a massive kind of impact as well in terms of just the the long-term progression of growth in that population as well.
We have a question online from Sandesh. Do you see assistive technologies, prosthetic or orthotics being developed further, or do you think with advances in medicine, such as technologies might be obsolete in the distant future?
Yeah, well, I think in some technologies we are seeing races between different types of solutions to the problem. So, for example, I've been following things like 3D printing of organs for 20 years, and it's always 20 years out. It was 20 years out 20 years ago. It's 20 years out today, right? And so, what I see is that in cases like that, sometimes it's other technologies that come and take over and obsolete something. And I think that's kind of the point of the question. What I think is going to work in terms of replacing organs is not 3D printed organs. I think it's the stem cells where we're going to be able to recreate organs more quickly with that than we will with 3D printing. But with prosthetics, I don't see the same thing. I don't see us being very close to being able to regrow limbs or things like that. But what I do see are a whole lot of technologies out there that could, if we chose to use them that way, could make the lives of people with various disabilities a whole lot easier. And you see that in some of the things like Neuralink, where the capabilities it has to allow people to communicate who have brain injuries that interfere with speech and things like that are pretty astounding, or the way that they can allow people to control their environment around them. We've had the ability to make those kind of devices for 30 or 40 years, not as advanced as now, but we've had that capability. We don't do a very good job of actually doing it. And it's because of the money, right? It's not a demographic that's large. It's not a demographic with a lot of influence. And it's not a demographic where there's a lot of profit for companies. And so it's been very, very underserved, this whole assistive technology market. I'm hoping that things like the Neuralink device and others like that are going to be used in those kinds of things. But I'm also not necessarily optimistic. I think that demographic is being targeted now, one, because it's a little more sympathetic, so they'll get a little more support for it, but also because it's easier to do that initial experimentation in those areas. And I think if the technologies become mainstream, they're going to be looking for applications where there's money. So we'll see how all of that plays out.
I have a follow-up question to that. I mean, back in the day, in the 1800s, 1900s, people were just trying things out, whatever works, and then that's how medical evolution happened. I mean, as to the point, AI also, 10 years ago, we were like, oh, no, it's not going to come in healthcare. It's dangerous. But when you mentioned like responsible development, like, do you think the FDA regulations are like helping us in the right direction or like restricting us? Like, if you could talk about that a bit.
Well, I think what we've seen over the last 20 years across many, many fields is that technology is changing faster than regulations. We're seeing that in terms of just social media and our privacy, our personal privacy, and laws and regulations about that. Our digital lives are nowhere nearly as protected as our physical lives. The FDA, when you think about things like AI, 3D printing, they are working as fast as they can, trying to keep up. But honestly, they're also struggling to do it because the technologies are changing so fast, and I don't see technologies slowing down, right? So we're going to continue to be pushing the boundaries, and regulations are going to be it's going to be working to keep up, I think.
So in that case, like, we have to be ethically sound first, like as we are developing, because regulations might be lagging, right? But
yes. Yeah, but you also mentioned something I wanted to comment on as well. You said 10 or 15 years ago we didn't really know about using AI, but I do want to point out that we have been using AI at Mayo for 15, 20 years. This is not new for us. Now we've been using machine learning, not Gen AI. So we have been doing this. We have had clinically deployed applications for well over 10 years. We have 200 or 300 deployed clinical applications right now. We've got 100 more in the pipeline. Gen AI has made a difference. For many of us, the first time I get this ringing, the first time we really heard about AI for many people in the world was in November of 2022 when ChatGPT was released. That was a lot of our big exposure to it, but it had been embedded into some of these major academic healthcare organizations and other places for years. And in fact, at the U last year, I went to a talk by somebody who was talking about AI in education, and he was working for University of South Florida or something like that, came here and gave a talk, and he was talking about this question we're asking about, will we as people ever accept stories written by AI, or will we continue to demand human written content? And he says that's such a funny question, because he's like, that question was answered 15 years ago. If you read, any of the sports stuff in AP and these other sources, he's like, the stuff has been written by AI for 15 years, right? It takes the box scores and it can put together a nice little story, and that's what people are reading, and they're consuming it just fine, and nobody's complaining about it. So, he's like, we've already established that people will accept things written by AI.
Any more questions online?
No more.
Yeah, and it kind of plays a little bit off the ethic kind of question is, if you look back, some of the breakthroughs that were made, for example, thinking about like kidney or liver transplant, some of the work here with Dr. Lillehei with open heart surgery years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were like uncountable numbers of deaths with those procedures, right? They had failure after failure after failure. The people that led on kidney transplants were practically driven from city to city as people kind of threw them out of the hospitals, and they persevered and they kind of pushed. And of course, now it's kind of revered the success, but it was a very kind of painful journey. And do you think that we still in society have the tolerance and the fortitude to go through those kinds of learnings today without throwing our hands up in disdain or anger and cutting it off much earlier than we learn something? Because as you think about things like genomics, for example, being used to do genetic screening of someone to kind of start tailoring therapies and deciding based on your profile, it does or does not make sense for you to have this device, this surgery, whatever it might be. There are going to be people who have a bad outcome possibly on that progression, right? So will we get to a point where we can have those same kind of painful learning cycles to get to a better outcome like we did 20, 30, 50 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think we still are now. And it's a great example because I mentioned the Mayo Gibbon heart-lung machine in 1955, first commercial heart-lung machine developed at Mayo, but that was built on work by Dr. Kirkland at Mayo, built on work by Dr. Gibbon, who I believe was at Harvard, who worked on that for 23 years. So he had been working on that a long time, and in about 1953, he gave up because he did surgery on 4 infants using his research version of that tool. 3 of the 4 died, and he's like, I just can't do this anymore. And he quit. And he continued his 20 years longer as a physician, but he worked on other stuff. Well, that got picked up and improved, and kind of the fundamental challenges were addressed. So, fast forward to the future, if you think about what's been going on in genomics, it's the same kind of stuff. It's been kind of up and down as we see possibilities for treating people with genomic disorders. And then we have these high-profile cases where something unanticipated goes wrong and the patient dies or has serious consequences, and we pull way back. Lost my battery. So I think that's going on now. I think genomics is a perfect example of that, and kind of a cool thing that went on when some like the CRISPR technology was being developed and the mRNA technology, thank you, was being developed. People were seeing the the ethical complications of it, people working in the field. And they actually came together as a large group and worked to develop ethical standards that they should be working within, because it was a new technology and it was changing really fast and governments weren't keeping up with it. And so, a significant number of them came together and agreed on what those ethical guidelines were. Now, not everybody did that. There were people working outside of that boundary as well. So, it's complicated. There aren't, those ethical conversations are really, they're really a struggle, because there's good and bad. It's like all of these things can harm a patient if not done carefully, and they can help patients. I come back to when we talk about doing medical devices, we're always doing a safety risk analysis on it, and we're always looking at the risk of harm versus the benefits to the patients. And there's many things we do that have negative consequences for patients, if patients die, but if more patients are helped and saved, then it's worth considering whether or not we should be doing that. And that's kind of foundational to how we decide if we can use a medical device, if the benefits outweigh the risk. And the challenge is figuring out how to value the benefits versus how to value the risks. And that's why when I talk about all of these technologies, I think about it in the context of ethics. I really think every engineer should have training in ethics. I think every business leader should have training in ethics. We should be used to having these kinds of conversations. We should understand some of the ethical frameworks that are out there to help us make informed decisions around these things. It doesn't always happen, but it should.
Question before I think we should move to Dr. Rolandi's talk. So quite on the same lines as the discussion before. So basically, how do you address security and compliance risks within the innovation framework at Mayo? And curious about the security perspective or such.
Yeah, well, hopefully I understand the question. I mean, we all know that there's a lot of hackers out there, and so many of our systems are dependent on networks, the computer systems that we've got. Healthcare is a huge target. We're probably the number one target for hackers at this point. Mayo is constantly being attacked, and we've had to take our network security pretty seriously. So we're not allowing anything inside our firewall that hasn't been vetted and tested. That we've got a pretty robust process that all of the vendors have to go through. And fortunately, we've been lucky that there haven't been any serious breaches in that. That's not true in all hospitals and all systems. And so, of course, that's a risk. If we think about the medical device industry in general, there are a number of devices out there. They haven't been hacked in the wild, but they have definitely been hacked in the lab. And the ability to hack them has been documented. And in particular, some of the implantable pacemakers and defibrillators. There have been recalls of literally hundreds of thousands of devices, which fortunately could be reprogrammed without having to pull the devices out. So it's definitely a risk. It's a risk when we're operating in this space and leveraging these technologies. If you think about how we're doing things, like we have now de-identified and digitized all of our data. And not just some of our data, I mean all of our data from 1889 on. It's all digitized and it's in the cloud. We've got something called the Mayo Clinic platform that we make available to other healthcare institutions to upload their data into. And unique patients in that system. And these were carefully designed in partnership with Google, and Google can't even get inside these things, and they are used to develop AI algorithms. And it's kind of a neat model in that the researchers figure out what kind of data they want to access and how they want to use it to train their model. And that gets submitted to the system. The model gets trained behind the firewall, and then it's the model that comes out, and none of the data is ever exposed.